Erik Thomson will be presenting on accelerating network connectivity across Europe. I lead the EMEA sales organization for Zayo Group. The format and agenda for this, briefly introduce what Zayo is for those that don't have background. I'll be talking a little bit about how network connectivity across Europe is impacting the pandemic, and then how we're going to kind of escape from that world into the next world of 5G and beyond, and how being thoughtful about network now is going to provide a competitive advantage going into 2021 and 2022. A little bit about Zayo Group. We're a global provider focused on providing mission critical bandwidth to the world's most impactful companies, fueling innovations that are transforming our society. When we talk about Zayo, we like to put our customers at the center and have them be the heroes of the story. And I think none more reflective than during the current pandemic. A little bit about Zayo and why we have expertise to speak to this, and why we can speak to infrastructure investment across Europe. One, Zayo has a 13-year history of a focus on infrastructure, focus on building deep, dense networks. And our owners, Digital Colony and EQT, bring even more expertise there. Leading investors focused on infrastructure, not getting distracted by different projects, and really thinking about the network and technology of tomorrow's and the infrastructure that's going to underlie that. And so we feel fortunate to have investors that are completely aligned with us, allowing us to focus and ultimately provide you, customers, the ability to kind of plan your network in a strategic way with folks that are focused on infrastructure. A little bit about what we do. We sell dark fiber. The company was built on fiber sales, and we've built on a very good stack of lit services on top of that, with direct access to cloud environments, which we call Cloud Link, wavelengths and transport between data centers, internet, DIA, IP transit, DDoS, a good Ethernet platform, SD-WAN, and then ultimately the ability to access global networks for our customers. Our reach, you have very strong networks between the US and Canada and into Western Europe. I'll highlight 13 million fiber miles and 50 markets in Europe, with 35,000 on-net buildings, including 1,200 data centers. And then, the number of markets, frankly, is a little bit less interesting than the density of the networks within major metro areas. So if you look across London, Paris, Dublin, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt, the network density and the number of buildings that we touch and the way that we've designed the network really is a network to scale. So we didn't build this network and these metro networks for the need right now. We've built these to scale into what the network of tomorrow is going to be. We're helping our customers think in the same way. We have on-ramps to most major cloud destinations, 370 cloud on-ramps. I'll highlight here AWS, Azure, Google, and Oracle. However, there are a lot of cloud environments that we can help provide dedicated private access to, enabling better performance, better availability, better security, and ultimately allowing you to be much more thoughtful about how you interact with your network and how your customers interact with your cloud destinations. I'm going to talk, now that I've established kind of Zayo's role in this, talk a little about the state of the industry in Europe. For everyone who is at home with multiple people trying to work, potentially kids streaming Netflix and trying to go to school, it's obvious, right, that the network usage has exploded. We see a 120% increase in Frankfurt in video conferencing traffic. This example of us being on this instead of in person in a conference is a great example. In London, large growth, Amsterdam growth, Dublin, 20% growth in traffic. All of this is pretty obvious, but what we're not seeing behind the scenes here is that a lot of this growth has actually just been accelerated. This is growth that we expected to see. This is growth that networks are trying to build to. But we've essentially accelerated multiple years of growth and condensed that. And at the same time, we are considering, everyone's being thoughtful during the pandemic about where you contribute investment. And we're seeing from an infrastructure lens that if we're not careful, we're going to exceed the ability to manage this on the current network infrastructure assets in Europe, but also have some choke points which are going to be unique in major markets in Europe. If we think about how does this impact us right now, and as I said, the telecom companies are not the heroes here. It's the folks on the front lines that are doing the research, treating patients, and helping us get through this pandemic. And where does network play a role in this? The way that network is inherent to every step of the way in treating this pandemic and moving past it, from the treatment through prevention into research and deployment. Network infrastructure is relevant. If you look at current treatment options, we're great to have virtual care and telemedicine, new diagnostic software and virtual triage, and things that are allowing us right now to take care of patients better. And then as we get into prevention, tracking and tracing, healthcare training, test center location, and mitigation, all of that relies on a strong, dense network and allowing different organizations to be able to communicate to each other securely, and we're taking care of privacy data, but doing it in a way that is, high performance and thoughtful. Into the research, and this is where it gets really interesting, is, right now you have companies that are doing research on how to solve COVID-19, but also trying to predict what is the next major virus, and can we actually predict the viruses that will exist and cure them and have a plan to treat them and have a plan to mitigate them before they even happen. And as big data, machine learning, and AI tack onto the network to do that research into the future, we try to avoid this happening again. And then ultimately, this is the challenge that we're about to face, which is deployment. Once we have a successful vaccine, how are we going to make sure that that gets to the right place at the right time, and that we're recording the data to help track where we have bursts and where we have effective treatment? And so all of this relies on a strong private-public partnership between healthcare, public organizations, and the companies that are helping solve this, built on a network, frankly, that can handle this, but is really bursting at the seams due to all of the other demands in the network. This growth is really leading us back into some of the other projects that we expected to see expanding. And what I'm going to talk here as I transition into 5G is a little bit about 5G and just what we can come to expect from this, but also how your organization can move from thinking about how you just tap into 5G, but how you actually harness it into your global initiatives. Zayo has a strong track record of success in supporting the major MNOs in 5G projects, and fiber to tower is something that we have quite a bit of experience. And so we feel well positioned to help organizations think about 5G. Just a couple of interesting facts. If we think about, one, autonomous vehicles are frequently cited as one of the more interesting projects associated with 5G. And the autonomous vehicle technology itself can really only advance as fast as the network that underpins the cities that it's going to work in. If we're looking at the comparison to today's iPhone, the comparison would be what you have on your iPhone looks like about 3,300 years of iPhone usage is what it takes to run a smart car. 500 times iPhone usage on the wireless usage outside of the car into the actual city. And then total wireless data transmission of about 300x what an iPhone does. So as you can tell, some of these small shifts that are going to tap into 5G require all of the investment that's going to go into making that network successful. This is where I want to talk a little bit about, what can you take away from this? We know 5G is coming. We know that it's going to change the way that cities operate. We know that you're going to want to tap into it for some of your campus locations or some of your day-to-day activities. What I'll highlight here is a customer that went beyond how are we going to tap into 5G, but how are we actually going to leverage this to a competitive advantage? This customer is one of the major box retailers globally, and said, we don't want to just tap into 5G in markets where it's relevant. We want to use 5G to change the way our business runs. We want to be able to put, cell towers on top of our buildings, providing wireless connectivity inside the buildings for our tenants and for our customers. We want to be able to have self-driving autonomous logistic vehicles park, be able to offload, be able to, transmit what they've dropped off and what they've picked up and have that go to the cloud. We want to have a drone landing station as we develop that delivery capacity. We want to have a fiber station in the parking lot, and ultimately track this into our security technology and our intelligent sensors within the building so that we can, turn the lights off in the refrigerators as they're not being used and turn them back on as people are in the building. And so you look at all of this, and it required, dark fiber, of course, 5G infrastructure, working with our mobile operator partners, private wireless network, Ethernet and higher layer services. And all of that was brought together to take a customer from how can we tap into this technology to how can we be one of the leaders in the space and actually leverage and harness the technology to give us a competitive advantage. So my first call out to the group in here would be, if you're thinking about how to tap into 5G, but you actually want to have a conversation around how this could be a competitive advantage for you and how we could think outside the box, we'd love to be your partner in that. If you think about planning for the network design first and the application layer second, one of the changes, of course, in the ecosystem is 10 years ago, a lot of conversations started around network and then went into storage. And now we see quite a bit of the opposite, which is, we're having conversations around the cloud strategy with customers and then kind of backing into the network and determining what that's going to look like. We're seeing customers now move a little bit more toward a hybrid model where those conversations are happening at the same time with the same weight, and ultimately we're seeing that be more effective. If you think about our major port cities in the world economy, they were designed around being close to water, being close to shipping routes, being close to other major metro cities on the water. Very naturally, as we go into a new world economy, those cities are the very hardest to deploy this kind of infrastructure. They're near the water, they're dense, it's hard to dig, there's a lot of traffic. And so we've essentially built a world economy that makes it a little bit harder to deploy network infrastructure and makes your ability to plan and think about your network that much of a competitive advantage as you think about what your company is going to do globally next, and specifically within Europe. Within Europe, we do have major metro markets that require a lot of investment. And if we're not leaning into that and forming strong public-private partnerships, we're going to miss and create a little bit of a disadvantage in those markets. I'll talk briefly here about one of these scenarios that we had in the US, and this was a Department of Transportation project that also involved autonomous vehicles and involved essentially an application layer that was really driving the technology behind the deployment of the solution. But our customer in this scenario was able to be thoughtful and was able to think, okay, we know that this is the market we want to be in. We know this is where we want to do our testing and some of our original logistics activities. However, we need to think about the network design that's going to underpin this, or we're ultimately going to hit a lot of bottlenecks in our testing and in our delivery of the final product. This customer also was working closely with Zayo throughout their project, so they knew exactly where we had additional fiber builds, where they could tap into current projects. And so my takeaway from this is, as you think about your 2021, 2022, and kind of 5 to 7 year plan, is really, do you understand the network that's being built around you? Do you understand kind of your important dependencies on network infrastructure that are coming up? And can we have a conversation with you that says, in 5 years, what is your competitive advantage and how is your network enabling that? If you could build your network from scratch tomorrow, what would it look like? And we can start leaning into how we can provide that advantage to your organization, or how you could look at your network and move it a little bit more from kind of a back office cost center into something that's enabling at the front lines your organization to be more successful. This is increasingly important as we work in, as I mentioned, in a global economy, and in the invisible borders that are popping up between countries. Brexit, which certainly won't go into depth, is a great example of this, where it's going to become more important understanding exactly where your data is traveling, understanding where it's being stored, if it's being shifted between cloud destinations, and ultimately having great fidelity over exactly where your data is moving, exactly the performance that you expect, and exactly any risks or any privacy concerns as you get into that. So my third call out for the group would be, I'd be eager to discuss, if there are areas where you don't have great fidelity over where your data is moving, or frankly, if you want to increase your visibility in your data governance and understand your data sovereignty, you're going to have a strong network understanding underpinning that, or you are leaving a lot to chance and you're letting other players that are being more thoughtful about that network kind of dictate how that's all routed. For us, that looks like talking about your transport strategy, how you're accessing global markets, and ultimately CloudLink. How are you accessing those cloud environments? And if it's through public internet, probably worth a conversation on if that's the right long-term access strategy for your team and your organization. The challenges that this is going to address. So if we talk about the current pandemic, which we mentioned, we talk about you enabling a competitive advantage for your organization, thinking about network. And if we think about 5G and how that's going to change the world, some of the things that this is also going to address, and this is what's exciting about this, is we not only get to make great business decisions and work deals together and bring you competitive advantage, we get to talk a little about how what we're doing is going to change the world. As we think about the resource constraints and population growth, having a strong network and public-private partnerships is going to be important to underpin that. If we think about the economic challenges in a global economy that also has a lot of invisible borders, that's something where understanding your network is going to allow us to change the world in a positive way. Telemedicine, teleeducation, getting more information and getting more treatment out to people that previously couldn't have gotten those treatments is going to change the world. And then ultimately, we're planning for the infrastructure needs a decade from now. But, the step after that is thinking about the next set of decades and building a world network infrastructure that's going to allow organizations to thrive, that's going to allow people to thrive, and that's going to kind of protect the world from the next beast of climate change that threatens to tear some of it down. So the pitch here is a little bit about, we want to talk about the network. We want to talk about giving you a competitive advantage, but I think we should all feel good knowing that what we're building is going to be sustainable and it's going to change the world for the better. I'd encourage anybody that's interested in this to stop by the booth, have a conversation with us. Love to have a conversation with you about how you can leverage your network to competitive advantage, how you can harness 5G and ultimately leverage the upcoming network investment and the infrastructure on top of that to provide your business with something new. And then ultimately understand that, having deep fidelity of where your data is moving, where you don't want it moving, we're happy to help on any of those steps. My information is right here. You have my phone number as well as my email address. We'll be open at the booth and we'll certainly be following up. So thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.